Alright everybody, in this video from Top Comics Pressing, we're actually going to crack a X-Men #1 from 1963 that was previously graded as a CBCS 5.0. Now that's a pretty big Silver Age grail, and I wanted to put a little bit of a preface and a disclaimer on this video to let you know that it was not an ad hoc decision or a gut decision to take a book like that out of its slab. So at a 5.0, that copy of X-Men #1 is worth in the tens of thousands of dollars, probably in the range of $20,000. And so that's a very big book. It's also already a very high grade book. So, you know, when you consider a book from the Silver Age and you go to the CGC census and you look at the distribution of grades, being at a 5.0 is already above average for that copy. And so it was not just an ad hoc decision to pop it open. It's not something I do lightly. So as you've seen in our videos from to crack or not to crack, the first thing I do is get a copy of those grader notes from CGC, especially now that they're freely included with the CGC membership. You know, I get very good pictures of the comic book before opening it up, and you know, even before accepting it in the mail, I got pictures to try to inspect which defects the prior grader notes might be looking for, to look for any defects that I could see that might not have been mentioned in the grader notes. And then when I got the book in person, I gave it a pretty thorough inspection in that slab, top and bottom, front cover, back cover, just to see if I could see anything that wasn't mentioned. In this particular case, it looked like the book may have been a little bit harshly graded to begin with, or definitely had not gotten the full attention from a prior press and clean that it might have deserved. And in addition to that, I considered the current condition of the book, whether it would be fragile or brittle. In this particular case, it had fairly good page quality listed from the prior grade. And the book did not show any evidence of tanning. It had secure staples, it had a secure spine, and it didn't show any creases or tears that looked like pieces that would easily come off or disconnect or dislodge. And so because of that, I thought this book would survive being opened, manipulated, handled, cleaned and pressed, and then sent back to CGC. But it's something, again, you want to consider, especially with big books, especially with old books that might be fragile, might have tanning, might have delicate connection at the staples. All of those things can go wrong. And indeed, they do go wrong if you handle enough books, especially with the stain removal and whitening. You know, there are real risks to handling old comics that include pieces coming loose, that include spine splits, that include staples detaching, that include new stains forming from some of the work in the stain removal and whitening that can happen. And so all those risks are real, and it's something you want to factor into your decision if you want to take that comic book out of the slab, and whether it's worth the risk to send to CGC or CBCS again to consider that grade bump. In this particular case, I thought it had a really good, strong chance of certainly at least maintaining its grade, if not getting a very strong bump, and I'm happy to say it turned out. How good it turned out, you'll have to wait and watch until the very end of the video, but I did want to put a preface here that not every book that is currently graded can benefit from a crack and clean and press. Some books might go down in grade, especially if the grading criteria at CGC has changed a little bit over the years and decades, or if they've recalibrated and reset a certain defect at a certain level. So it is something you want to be aware of. Anyway, stay tuned. I think this one's epic. And while I don't have a different X-Men #1, I do at least have the t-shirt from the Jim Lee series here to help celebrate. So Excelsior, stay tuned. Please like, subscribe, follow, and I thank you for your attention.
All right, welcome everybody. This is an incredibly special video here from Top Comics Pressing. I received this copy of X-Men #1, 1963, famous Jack Kirby cover, epic first appearance of the original X-Men and Magneto. And the client requested that this get into a CGC slab, and so I was asked to crack this out and to give it a dry clean and a press. As you can see at a 5.0, this thing already is just truly epic in terms of its quality. It has just very phenomenal eye appeal. It does have a very small tear right there, and there is some creasing up here along the corner, so we're going to want to be very careful with that when dry cleaning this. But this thing overall is just an incredible copy. It is a very bright cover. It has a very bright back cover. One of the reasons I agreed to work on it, because typically I would decline books that I don't think I can improve, but you can see down the spine here, there is a good amount that leads me to believe it was not thoroughly and robustly dry cleaned. And you can kind of see that over here on the edge. And so this thing is just a true treasure to work on, and hopefully, if I'm maybe very lucky, we'll get a little bit of a bumpski out of it. I'm not expecting a large bumpski because we do have, you know, the crease up there, there's a tear here, there's obviously spine stress lines, and so this seems certainly not over or undergraded by CBCS. And yeah, you can see there's a good amount of corner wear there, corner blunting. And so it seems pretty spot on, but we'll see if we can give it a dry clean and maybe a little bit of a polish. And hopefully CGC will give it its A+ rating and give us a little bit of a bump. So for cracking a CBCS slab, these I find to be much more challenging to open than CGC slabs. I actually find the CGC ones to be trivial to crack, but the CBCS ones, especially these new ones, have a very flush, very rounded seal, and it's incredibly difficult to jam anything up there to bust it open. If you've watched my other openings, I always like to open from the top so I'm away from the comic book, but unfortunately on the CBCS slab, these little keyholes are on the bottom. So I'm going to take my flathead in here and hopefully get a good crack. There we go. That shatter is not quite what I was going for, but we'll see if that's enough. We'll try the other one over here. There we go. That's the sound I wanted. There we go. Try to get the screwdriver in there without pushing the comic. Like I said, I find these more challenging. I was able to get around the corner here. So let's see if I can slide the screwdriver in that edge. Again, I'm definitely not gonna speed through this one. So if it looks slow, I apologize. If it's boring, I apologize. But there we go. We're making good progress up the seam. So let's go back over here and hopefully we can get around the bottom corner. Put the screwdriver on the edge here. Oh, that's exactly what I do not want. If you get splicing up into the top, that almost always causes a problem because you're splitting the direction of the pressure on there. And that typically causes problems. You start getting chipping because we want that inner well to come out nice and smooth. We don't want any issues with it. There we go. That was the corner stud. Again, I'm taking my time in there, trying to not rush anything. There we go. This should be home free now, at least for the inner well. Just gonna slide that up over there. Pop the corner studs. Again, trying very careful. You do not want that screwdriver to slide into the comic book, so very careful to just slide it in there before twisting. Sometimes I try to see exactly like that, and that's what you want to avoid. That one didn't come close to the comic, so I'm okay with it, but definitely. I'm sure that there are easier ways to do this. I know if you're at a con, they have a cool little device that cracks these open because they go through so many for signature series, but there we go. All right, usually I'll try to slide the book out from the inside, but for this one, we're just gonna take the whole shell right off. Not even gonna mess with it. So here's your 5.0 label. Now that I think about it, I didn't even take pictures of it in the slab. So that's, I guess, shame on me. Here is the inner well. Now, what's unfortunate about the CBCS ones is I find them to be tighter than the CGC ones. I think the CGC ones have a little bit more gap, so they're a little bit easier to cut out. But in this case, the comic is already slid flush to the bottom, so we're going to just give it a gentle tap in there. Try to give us as much space as possible. And keep this blade as far away from that comic book as I can. If we're going to screw this up, it's going to be right there. No, that's good. That edge came loose, so we're good. Over here. Line it up with the cut mark. I'll go very, very slowly here. This direction always makes me more nervous than the first cut for some reason. But thankfully, I think we got enough clearance there. Let's see if that'll come off now. There we go. That's the whole thing, and that is clear all the way through. So that's exactly what I want to see. All right, so now what I'm going to do is get this knife out of here. And showing all these little pieces of plastic off my desk. We're actually just going to get rid of this whole cutting board because hopefully we're done with the cutting. Normally now what I would do is slide the comic out, but I want absolutely zero risk of these little plastic pieces touching that comic. And so what I'm going to do is gash down the outer well here a good distance so that I give it as much clearance as possible. Okay. Now what I have is a nice space there for that comic to slide out, and I'm going to slide it supported and then straight up. The gravity does thing, and I'm going to put this down as quickly as possible. And CBCS is pretty smart about putting these nice plastic sheets in there. It's very hard to see through there, but it does a good job of supporting it almost like a backer board in the center. So that's really great. All right, so here we are. We're now out of the slab. I'm going to do some quick before and after pictures, and then I'm going to come back and dry clean this thing in front of you here on camera. All right, everybody. I have before and after pictures captured here for this copy of X-Men #1. I've got my eraser here, my cloth per the usual, a cotton round, and my micro eraser. And we're going to go ahead and get started cleaning this thing. What I'm not going to do for this one, which I've done for my other videos, is turn off the overhead light because I need the extra light on this copy. So that means there's going to be some extra shadows and there might be a little bit of other videography issues, but I'm not going to jeopardize the work here for the image. So I gave this book a quick inspection when doing the pictures. The major defects you'll note is the tear right here. There is a pretty big crease up there to be aware of when dry cleaning. There's a good amount of creasing down here, so we're going to be careful with that. If you look very carefully, some of these blotches to me actually look like ink transfer. So at some point this was pressed up against something that had ink on it and that had transferred over. I think that's actually the case right in here too. So, I'm going to give those spots a light clean, and if they don't budge, I'm just going to leave them. On the back cover, you'll notice that there's some creasing here. There's some creasing along the edge here, the open edge. So somebody put some finger bends in this at some point, which is okay. And so again, I think that CBCS grade was pretty fair for this book, given its overall condition and some of its defects. You can see a little bit of color breaking over here. But we're going to see what we can do for it. And I'm just going to start right here in the middle in this nice big white spot. And I apologize if I drift off into silence. That is simply me focusing. Go super light over Cyclops' hand. Try to get in between here, but I think this little dab right there is some of that ink transfer. That's also the case in Iceman's globe here. Now around the bottom edge, I'm going to be very careful because it does have creasing and I don't want to pop a chunk off. So the amount of pressure I'm applying here is very, very small. And I'm trying to avoid anything that's more colored than that black. Black is typically much more forgiving than other colors like that purple. And if you look at my eraser, I am getting out a good amount of stuff. I'm going to clean that on some tape. I just put a 2x2 inch strip of painter's tape off camera, and I just rubbed that eraser head on there to try to knock off some of that crud. So you can see it's a little bit brighter now. Very careful down the spine. But unfortunately, that's where stuff builds up because the staples are fatter, so that's where you're going to get a lot of contact and friction, and you can see all that crud. So again, we're just going to clean that off on some painter's tape. Come back. See what we can do here in X-Men, or in this little ice chunk. Got a good amount of crud out of there, so that's good. I actually own a copy of this book. Mine is not this nice, but I bought it when I was in high school. And at the time, my mom thought I was completely crazy for spending that amount of money on a comic book. I paid around fair market value. I didn't really know anything about hardcore comic collecting at the time. This would have been around when the original Sony X-Men movies came out, so Ian McKellen as Magneto, Hugh Jackman introduced as Wolverine, Halle Berry as Storm, etc. That kind of really epic cast. And I decided I wanted either a Spider-Man comic or an X-Men comic. And at the time, the X-Men comic was significantly more affordable than an Amazing Fantasy 15. It's still true today. So those two have gone up in roughly the same proportion in value over the decades, so it's not like I lost out on a quote great investment. I didn't buy it to invest in, I just bought it because it was cool and I was a comic person and I liked the movies. That was about it. Thankfully today the value on this book has gone up a bunch, where I can look at my mom and tell her, see, it was a good idea. And then she says, how much are you going to get for that book? And I said, well, $0, because it's going to sit in my collection for a very long time. And then she says, see, it was a bad purchase at the time. But that's okay. I enjoy it. Very cool book. Got so many first appearances. Magneto, Beast, Jean Grey, Cyclops, Iceman, Angel, Charles Xavier. Alright, so we got a tear here. So I'm actually going to put my finger over that tear and apply just a pinch of pressure, because I do not want any risk of this eraser head going across that tear. So I'm basically using my finger as a shield to protect it from even an accidental slip. It's going to be like one of the longest videos here of all time. Just a little bit right there, but I don't want to get too close to her hand. Alright, here's the beast. I'm going to clean that off beforehand. Coming up on this crease here on this corner, and so this is that area I want to be especially careful with. And so I'm going to again put my finger over that crease just so I know where it is, because I never want to apply force across it. So I do not want even the slightest chance of a tear there. And thankfully sometimes there's dirt built up on a crease. and that gets a little dicey. But thankfully this crease is free of dirt, so we can be a little bit less concerned about that. And then these dots here are again that ink transfer, so we're not going to be able to clean that off. Follow this again. And you'll notice I'm not doing a lot. You know, Bronze Age books, later Silver Age books, you can rub a lot more vigorously. You'll see that in my other videos, but this is already pretty clean. And it's such a beautiful copy. But you can see I am still getting stuff even off the ostensibly white areas. So there's a little bit of an edge tear here, so I want to be very careful to avoid that. I'm just going to put my finger over it. Do not hit the neck, but you can see I am getting dirt. Now this line to me looks like it was rust transferred from a book that was on top of it at some stage. And so I'm not going to be able to do anything with those vertical lines there. That, to me, it looks like transferred staple rust. So we're just going to wipe ever so carefully over that red. Goober there. We're just going to try to lighten up. It does feel like it's a little rough, so there's something stuck on there, maybe. I think actually it might be indented into the paper, so I'm just going to leave it. I'm not even going to try to scrape it off. I don't think that that's going to move its grade. It's only going to cause damage if I screw it up. So we're going to run the risk-benefit ratio there in my head and come up with do not engage. All this I'm going to skip. It looks like there's very, very, very minor tanning on the spine, which is just my cue to stay away from it. It's probably not even bad enough where CGC will note it. And I think that does it, but what I'm going to do now is try to go over everything with the Swiffer cloth. Off the table as I can before I start rubbing the comic. I shake this off camera, by the way. I just will flick it to try to dislodge as much of the bits off of it as I can manage. Very careful around the split there. So it looks like there's a little bit of marble chipping starting. Okay, now what I'm going to do is just look at this under the glare and try to find if there are any areas where I have eraser residue. Just going to scan it very carefully, looking for lines that might have gotten left behind. Sometimes if you polish everything around a spot, but don't polish that spot, you end up with, there's a little bit here by B's hand. This actually might be a fingerprint. A really light fingerprint left there underneath his elbow. It's a light fingerprint. This shows up in the glare. Just see it distort. There you go, it looks better. Scanning it all. All right, that looks good. There's a little bit there, but that's on the crease, so we're gonna leave that. Head to the back cover here. This is again where I always find it the most gratifying, is right down the rear spine. So I'm just gonna be careful to avoid the top. right by the staples. Again, not overdoing anything, but you can see that that eraser head is pretty gross. So that's all the gunk we're getting off of there. And some of this is definitely ink transfer. Oh, there you go, there's more crud. Alright, corners, as you've already heard me say, make me very nervous. So I'm going to take my Swiffer sheet here and just stroke towards that corner. As gentle as possible. And while I have the Swiffer sheet out, I'm just going to do all four corners. It looks like the inner wraps are slightly thinner or slightly shorter than the cover. And so I'm just going to take a sheet of paper under here just because I don't want to be putting pressure on the part that's folded under. So I'm just going to put that paper under there as a little bit of a area to kind of flatten out. That's what the support under the cover when you press does as well. It just gives it something to push onto and kind of flatten out against. That's going to be it. I definitely don't want to pull any gloss off. So I'll do for that. I'll go back to the spine here. See, it's still getting crud. It's a very, very, very slight tear starting at the top staple, and you'll notice that that staple is slightly recessed already. So we're going to have to be very careful of that when we go to press. Make sure that we have adequate support in there. I've had pretty good luck not recessing further a Silver Age book, but that one's already got a little bit of a pucker inward and a little bit of staple tear, and there's just a hint of tanning around that staple, so that's going to make it quite delicate. We'll do our best though. One thing on these books is definitely do not ever, ever, ever open them all the way flat. You definitely will just put way too much stress on the staples on that cover, and the wraps inside will be fine, but the cover is what's going to be brittle along that spine, and it's going to crack and split, and you're going to detach a staple, and you're going to be very, very upset with yourself. So definitely do not do that. You'll see me cut my hand, and the reason for that is I want the book to fold into that slot so that it never opens up. And again, I'm keeping between my fingers so that my fingers act as a shield there on the sides and a support so that I don't accidentally, move or rip the paper at all. So while I'm moving the eraser, my fingers are kind of being the anchor as I go through that. And you can see it's getting off a good amount of crud. There's a lot of really small micro tearing up here, and so again, never this way, always only this way. All this text, I'm gonna actually just get off my eraser. You can see it, you know, there might be a little bit of pink in there, but that's mostly just black crud. So for gently going over that. Certainly if you rub at it vigorously, you're going to start pulling a lot of ink and color, but a really quick, very light, just stroke over the top of it. Works out pretty well. All right, we're going to round the corner here. This is where some of that more intense ink spotting was from. And so we'll just be mindful of that, not to overdo anything. You can see there's a fingerprint right in here. You know, on a higher grade book, I might try to do something about that, but on this book, mid-grade, super key, certainly if I leave a big, you know, area of white rubbed ink, that's going to be worse than leaving the fingerprint on there. So we're just going to leave that fingerprint on the yellow. It is better to be cautious on a book like this than it is aggressive. At least that's my view. It's already an incredible copy. There's no point in overdoing it and risking anything foolish. I don't think it'll move the grade any. I've got a tear and a crease and some edge creasing and some edge wear, and so it's gonna be where it's gonna be. You see, just in this space, I mean, it's got a lot of crud here to clean out. So dirty. Definitely was not dry cleaned. Yep, lost my eraser. Shucks. Put my finger on the corner there to make sure I don't do anything crazy. Try to get anything that Mr. Clean Pad missed, but we're going to keep the corner stabilized. Some tearing down here, so I'm just going to put my finger right over that as a cue to myself, do not rub there. Alright, so I think that does the perimeter. What we're going to do is just go really light in between all this stuff now. Do not need to go hardcore. You know, in a different issue I might rub over all this text, but not going to do that here. It's not going to move anything. This thing's already incredibly clean for a book of this issue, or a book of this era. Alright. Those bigger word bubbles there. So I think that about does it. I'll give this thing a couple of solid wipe offs. Let me take this paper out. This darker spot up here again is that ink transfer, so I could rub on that for an hour and it won't come out unless I go through the paper, which obviously we don't want to do. I'm just going to pull that out. Going to clean under the book. lifting it in the middle of the spine, and my fingers are about an inch in off of the spine so that there's no risk of me putting more spine pressure in there, or spine tick. So I'm squeezing about an inch off the spine, clean under it. There we go. Clean my swipper sheet. Again, I start about 2/3 of the way down the book and go towards the edges, and then I'll go the opposite way. There's a little speck of staple tarnish there. That's not going to affect anything, and I definitely don't want to be accused of polishing the staple or messing with the staples in any way. That's one of their favorite ways to mark a book conserved. So yeah, that little speck of rust might limit you from being above a 9.0, but this book's not in that realm anyway. So we're gonna, and just to make sure I don't have any goobies on this thing going into the press, we're gonna do one more clean here on the front cover. More wipe. All right, that's it. This is now a dry cleaned copy of X-Men #1 ready for a press, and fingers crossed it'll come out looking even more beautiful than it does right now. All right, everybody, here we are post-press on this copy of X-Men #1. Just an incredibly gorgeous copy. You'll see it still has the same crease there in the top corner right there. Still got the same tear, but I think overall it presents a lot better after a little bit of a dry clean. We got a few wrinkles in the press, so I did take pictures of that on the green backerboard background. So hopefully you'll forgive me for making sure this thing is protected in Mylar immediately after pulling it out of the press. So I did not discuss the press technique, but what I did is follow the comic book CPR Silver Age press, almost verbatim. So I did a solid hydration, and then I did one backerboard in center, and then put 65-pound cardstock under the front and the back cover, and then sandwiched that between SRP paper, sandwiched that between magazine backer boards, and then sandwiched that between aluminum plates. Press temp was 155 for 15 minutes, and then I did a minimum of a 12-hour cool down. So I killed the power on the press and let it sit for at least 12 hours. In this case, it ended up being closer to 14 hours. Some people do 24. I personally have not seen a benefit from going to a full 24 from 12. If I have a book that I'm really worried about reversion for, what I'll do instead is press it, take it out, do some ironing around the area that I'm worried about reverting, and then I'll do another 12-hour press. And I think I get a much better result out of that than a single 24-hour press. So anyway, that's my method. Here's the book. I would not send it to CGC like this all by itself. So what I'm going to do here is actually, oh, I lost my Sharpie. Here we go. Put on the back a note here, just saying that it's X-Men #1 with my blue tape. Really like the blue tape here. We go X-Men #1, 1963. Holy cow, right? Just like, what an incredible book. This is such a treat to do. Made my weekend. Should have grabbed a picture of the inside of a good wrap there. That was a mistake on my part. All right, so then what I do is the same thing I do with my window bags here. I'm going to take this one and I'm going to slide it inside of a Golden Age Mylar from Gerber. So the standard size is the one that the book is in, and then the Golden Silver Age is actually slightly larger than that, as you can see here. And if I straighten it out, you know, you can see that white perimeter kind of over there, and so that's giving that inner comic a nice border. And for a comic like this, I'm going to make sure it's protected both from the front and the back, and that it's fully sandwiched between those backer boards. And just like what I said in the video on how to make a window bag, the advantage of this is, you know, if somebody drops it on the floor, or God forbid does something else crazy, the thing that's going to take the brunt of that is going to be that corner of the full back of the larger board, and then before that it'll be the next full backer board, and only then should the comic take any impact from it. And so this to me is the kind of best way to pack up these really high-end, really nice books to send to CGC. I know that some people use top loaders, but I actually find this to be more secure than a top loader. It doesn't actually twist as much. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. So hopefully you enjoyed the video here. Give me a like, a thumbs up, a subscribe, a follow. Find me on Instagram, Facebook, etc. And please go ahead and seek out the Captain Mike Facebook group for some tips on pressing if you're looking to get into the hobby. So take it easy, everybody. All right, everybody, welcome back here to Top Comics Pressing. It's about time that we take a peek at the final grade and the final end result of this copy of X-Men #1 from 1963. So the grade is back from CGC and the book is safely back with the owner. Just so you know, the book went from me directly to CGC and then directly to the owner. So unfortunately, I don't have the physical book to show you. All I have here is a picture, but let's go ahead and see how we did. And with this book, I think a little bit of suspense here is definitely warranted. So we'll go, oh. All right, there it is. So this copy went from a CBCS 5.0 all the way up to a CGC 6.0 copy. So that is quite a bump on a major Silver Age key. Some might even call it a grail. And in this particular copy, we did have that big tear right above the purple, right next to Jean Grey. And so we can use that as a lineup. I will point out that the full before and after pictures will be both on my Facebook page and on my Instagram. And so you can go ahead and check out all the before and afters there, see every little smudge and finger bend that we were able to get out to help increase the grade of this book from a 5 to a 6. At a 6.0, it is definitely an elite copy of X-Men #1 from 1963, and so I'm pretty stoked about that for the owner. If you found this helpful, friendly, if you found it encouraging, go ahead and give a like, a thumbs up, a subscribe, a follow on Instagram, Facebook, and of course, click the subscribe button on YouTube, please. Other than that, not much else to say except for Excelsior.